The whispering winds of Fort Monroe. The sun cast its first golden rays over the rugged hills of Fort Monroe, painting the sky with hues of amber and rose. A gentle breeze rustled through the pine trees, carrying with it the scent of dew-kissed earth and the distant melody of chirping birds. The town, nestled amidst the Suleiman Mountains, began to stir awake, its cobblestone streets echoing the footsteps of early risers. Ion stood at the edge of the cliff, overlooking the vast expanse below. The valley stretched out like a tapestry, dotted with patches of green fields and winding rivers that shimmered under the morning sun. He inhaled deeply, letting the crisp mountain air fill his lungs, grounding him in the present moment. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. After years of living in the bustling city of Lahore, he had returned to his ancestral home in Fort Monroe. The decision hadn't been easy, but the longing for a simpler life and the pull of his roots had been too strong to ignore. As he made his way back to the family cottage, memories flooded his mind. He recalled summers spent chasing butterflies in the meadows, evenings listening to his grandfather's tales by the fireplace, and nights gazing at the star-studded sky, dreaming of adventures beyond the mountains. The cottage, a quaint stone structure with ivy-covered walls and a red-tiled roof, stood as a testament to time. Its wooden shutters creaked open, revealing the warm glow of the hearth inside. Ion's mother, Amara, stood at the doorway, her face lighting up as she saw her son approach. "Breakfast is ready," she called out, her voice tinged with joy. Inside, the aroma of freshly baked bread and spiced chai filled the air. The kitchen, with its rustic charm, was a haven of comfort. They sat together, sharing stories and laughter, bridging the years of separation with heartfelt conversations. Later, Ion ventured into the town, eager to reacquaint himself with familiar faces and places. The marketplace buzzed with activity, vendors selling vibrant fabrics, children chasing after kites, and elders engaged in animated discussions over cups of steaming tea. He was greeted with warm smiles and hearty embraces, the townsfolk welcoming him back with open arms. As the day wore on, he found himself drawn to the old library, a place that had been his sanctuary during his youth. The scent of aged paper and the quiet ambience enveloped him as he browsed through the shelves, rediscovering cherished books and forgotten tales. In the corner, he noticed a young woman engrossed in a novel, her brow furrowed in concentration. Sensing his gaze, she looked up, their eyes meeting briefly. A soft smile played on her lips before she returned to her reading. Intrigued, Ion approached, initiating a conversation that flowed effortlessly, revealing shared interests and a mutual appreciation for literature. As dusk settled over Fort Monroe, casting long shadows and bathing the town in a golden hue, Ion felt a sense of contentment he hadn't experienced in years. The mountains stood tall and unwavering, the winds whispered secrets of old, and the stars began to twinkle in the vast sky above. In that moment, amidst the serenity of his surroundings and the warmth of rekindled connections, Ion knew he was home. The threads of yesterday. The next morning, Ion awoke to the rhythmic sound of raindrops tapping against the cottage windows. The monsoon had arrived, cloaking Fort Monroe in a soft mist that blurred the edges of the hills and gave the town an ethereal glow. He lay in bed for a while, listening to the gentle hum of nature, before finally rising and drawing the curtains open. The landscape outside had transformed into a watercolor painting, lush, green, and alive. Downstairs, his mother was already at work in the kitchen. She moved with practiced grace, her hands kneading dough while humming a lullaby he hadn't heard in years. Ion leaned against the doorway, watching her with quiet admiration. "You've always loved the rain," she said, without turning. "Even as a boy, you'd run outside without shoes, chasing puddles and catching colds." Ion chuckled. Some things never change. They ate breakfast together in comfortable silence, the kind that only years of deep love can create. But beneath the warmth, a question lingered in Ion's mind, one he hadn't dared to ask since his return. "What happened to Dada Abba's journals?" he finally said, stirring his tea slowly. His mother paused. "They're still in the attic." I haven't touched them since he passed. Why do you ask? I used to read them when I was little, he said, his voice distant. I remember one entry about a hidden trail near the river. He wrote like it was a secret worth protecting. Amara looked at her son, a soft melancholy in her eyes. He believed the land held stories. He said some things aren't meant to be forgotten. After breakfast, Ion climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. Dust motes danced in the air as he pushed open the creaking door. The space smelled of old wood and memory. Boxes lay stacked neatly, covered in linen cloths. In the corner, under a faded trunk, he found them, his grandfather's leather-bound journals, their edges worn, pages yellowed with time. He carried one downstairs and sat by the fire, flipping through the familiar looping handwriting. One passage caught his attention. Beyond the bend of the Saria River, where the wild marigolds grow, lies the forgotten path. Not marked on maps, not spoken in town. But I remember. I remember because the land remembers. Ion read it again, slower this time. The words stirred something in him, a mixture of curiosity and longing. He had no idea if the trail still existed, but he felt a pull, as if his grandfather was whispering to him from the past. That afternoon, the rain stopped, and the clouds thinned just enough to reveal pockets of blue sky. Ion laced up his boots, packed a small satchel, and set out toward the river. The Saria River had swelled from the rain, its waters rushing and glistening under the retreating clouds. He followed the bank for nearly an hour, eyes scanning the edge of the woods for any sign of a trail. Just as he was about to give up, he spotted them, marigolds, golden and wild, growing in a crescent formation near a cluster of rocks. Heart pounding, he pushed past the underbrush and found it a narrow path, overgrown but unmistakably man-made. The air was cooler here, heavy with the scent of wet leaves and soil. The trail wound through dense trees and opened occasionally to reveal glimpses of the valley below. As he walked deeper, Ion felt a strange calm settle over him. It was as if each step untangled the knots within him. This land wasn't just his birthplace, it was his inheritance. Every rock, every root seemed to carry a memory, a fragment of the stories his grandfather once told. Then, the path ended at a small clearing. In the center stood a stone bench, half covered in moss. Behind it, carved into a flat rock, were initials, M.A., the same as his grandfather, Mirza Ion. Ion sat on the bench, rainwater dampening the seat. He looked around, the rustling trees, the distant murmur of the river, the quiet. It all felt sacred. And in that moment he understood. This was never just about a trail. It was about remembering, about preserving the voice of someone who had loved this place deeply. As the sky began to darken with the return of the rain, Ion stood. He would return, and next time, he'd bring a notebook of his own. The girl with the bookmark. 2 days had passed since Ion discovered the hidden trail and the stone bench bearing his grandfather's initials. The memory of it still lingered in his mind like a song he couldn't stop humming. He spent the following morning sketching the path from memory, marking points of interest in a small leather-bound notebook. But that morning, his thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl in the library. She had occupied only a brief moment in his life so far. A glance, a smile, a shared comment about a book, but something about her had stayed with him. He remembered the way her fingers delicately turned the pages, how her eyes lit up when she spoke about old Urdu poetry. He hadn't even asked her name. So, he returned to the library. The librarian, an elderly man with thick glasses and a permanent scowl softened by affection for his books, nodded in recognition as Ion entered. The library smelled of rain-damp paper and wood polish. Ion's eyes scanned the reading room. Empty. He moved toward the poetry section where he'd seen her last, running a hand along the spines of the books until he found the one she'd been reading, Diwani Caleb. As he pulled it off the shelf, something fluttered to the ground. A bookmark. Not a generic one, but handmade. A pressed marigold flower laminated inside clear plastic, bordered by a delicate gold trim. On the back was a small note in neat handwriting. The only real voyage of discovery lies not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. MP. Ayan turned it over again and again, a small smile forming on his lips. MP. Her initials, perhaps? He took the book to a table and sat with it, flipping through the worn pages. The same floral scent clung faintly to the paper. It was strange how a stranger could leave behind something so personal, and how even that could make the world feel warmer. The door creaked open, and in walked the girl. She paused when she saw him, her eyes widening slightly, then narrowing with curiosity. He held up the bookmark, careful not to appear too eager. "You left this," he said. She approached, her expression unreadable. "I was wondering where that went." "Marigolds?" he asked. "They're my favorite," she replied, taking the bookmark gently, though not putting it away. "I found a field full of them 2 days ago," Ayan said, unsure why he was sharing it. "Near the Saria River. It led me to a hidden trail." Now it was her turn to look intrigued. "Sounds like the start of a poem. I think my grandfather would have said the same." She sat across from him without invitation, placing the bookmark back inside the book. "I'm Meher," she said. "Meher Perveen." "Ayan Mirza." They shook hands. It was formal, almost ceremonial. Then, as if some unspoken wall had crumbled, their conversation unfolded with ease. They spoke of books, of Caleb and Foiz, of monsoon dreams and childhood stories. Ayan shared fragments of his grandfather's journals. Meher spoke of her love for collecting wildflowers and preserving them like memories. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Eventually, the librarian cleared his throat loudly, glancing at the clock. It was nearly closing time. They both laughed, surprised at how quickly time had passed. Outside, the clouds had parted, casting Fort Monroe in a golden glow. They walked side by side down the main street, past the tea stalls and shopkeepers closing for the evening. "I'd like to see that trail someday," Meher said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I'll take you," Ayan replied. "It's not on any map, but I think you'll like it." They paused at the fork in the road, where her path turned off toward the eastern ridge. She hesitated. "Maybe you should keep the bookmark. Seems like it belongs in your story now." He looked at it, then back at her. "Only if you promise to come find it again." Meher smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, and turned to leave. Ayan stood there, watching her disappear into the fading light, the bookmark warm in his palm. He didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in years, the world felt full of possibilities. Echoes beneath the pines. The next morning dawned cool and silent, the kind of morning Fort Monroe wore like a secret. Mist clung low to the earth, veiling the trees in a dreamlike haze. Ayan stood at the edge of the pine forest, the same leather notebook tucked under his arm, the marigold bookmark resting inside the cover like a talisman. Today, Meher was joining him. She arrived quietly, as if the forest had summoned her. She wore a soft green shawl, the same color as the hillside moss, and carried a small canvas bag across her shoulder. They exchanged a smile, one that didn't need words, and set off down the winding path toward the river. The forest, damp from the night's rain, breathed around them. Branches above weaved a canopy of shadows and light, while the ground below was springy with pine needles. Birds called from unseen perches, and the occasional rustle reminded them they were not alone. "Why did your grandfather never tell anyone about this path?" Meher asked as they walked. Ayan looked ahead, carefully stepping over a fallen branch. "I think he believed some things lose their magic when too many people know about them. Maybe it was his way of preserving a piece of wonder. Or hiding a part of himself," Meher added thoughtfully. The trail grew steeper, then leveled out again as the river's distant murmur grew louder. Ayan led the way through the thick brush until they reached the marigold crescent, the marker he had found days earlier. Beyond it, the forest opened to reveal the familiar clearing. The stone bench stood as they had left it, patient and still, watching over the valley below. Sunlight filtered through the trees, falling in stripes across the moss-covered rock bearing the initials M.A. Meher stepped closer and ran her fingers gently across the carved letters. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "like a memory caught in stone." Ayan sat beside her, pulling out his grandfather's journal. He flipped to the entry he had read before and handed it to her. As she read, her expression shifted from curiosity to stillness, the weight of the words settling on her shoulders. "There's more here than just a secret trail," she said. This place, it meant something to him. They sat in silence, the breeze threading through the trees. Then Meher reached into her bag and pulled out a sketchpad. Flipping to a blank page, she began to draw. The bench, the clearing, the river far below. Her pencil moved quickly, capturing the moment with delicate strokes. "I like to draw places that feel alive," she said. "As if, somehow, they'll remember me too." Ion watched her, fascinated by how her hands worked so instinctively, turning emptiness into meaning. He felt the same when he wrote in his notebook, like he was recording something fragile before it disappeared. After a while, they wandered beyond the clearing, following a narrow deer trail that curved along the hillside. The farther they went, the quieter it became, until even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then they found it. Tucked beneath a cluster of boulders was a small, weathered box, half buried, nearly swallowed by time. Ion knelt and brushed away the dirt, fingers trembling slightly. The lid creaked open. Inside were folded pages, wrapped in cloth and sealed with an old brass pin. He unwrapped them carefully. The ink was faded, the script unmistakably his grandfather's. "Another journal?" Meher asked. Ion nodded. No title, just entries. He skimmed one, then another. These weren't like the others. They were personal, letters, confessions, thoughts he had never dared share. Some addressed to Ion's grandmother, some to "my grandson, who I hope will find this." Ion's throat tightened. These weren't just stories. They were his grandfather's legacy, hidden here for someone who would understand. Meher rested a hand on his shoulder. "He left this for you." "No," Ion said softly, eyes still on the pages. "He left it for both of us." They sat there, reading until the sun began to dip behind the mountains. When they finally rose to leave, Ion carefully wrapped the letters and placed them in his bag. As they walked back, the silence between them was filled not with distance, but with reverence. What they had found was not merely an inheritance of ink and paper, but a beginning.